Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Violence, nations becoming more angered, bombing campaigns, allies and foes now changing sides. All this is part of our news today. But first, Katan, we're going to start by taking a look at the huge amounts of oil now being stored in none other than the U.S.
Hey, maybe that'll lower some prices for us.
We'll see. Well, in a recent interview with Phil Verledger, founder and president of PK Verledger LLC, Bloomberg News posed the question, where is all this oil coming from that we're storing here in the U.S.? Verledger explained, well, the United States has effectively become the world's sponge for oil. Storage is much less expensive here in the United States than at sea. It costs roughly $1.50 a month to store at sea and 50 cents a barrel to do it here.
Oh, a third. That's not bad. Well, Mr. Verledger continued, there's been a massive construction wave of new storage capacity here. So what's happening is U.S. production and Canadian production is flowing to the U.S.
Mr. Verledger was asked how much oil the U.S. could absorb for storage. He said, it's not totally clear. The numbers that we came out from the plant suggest that we may have another 200 to 250 million barrels of storage capacity left. Now, we can't use it all, he said, but we probably can absorb another 100 million barrels. Now, this was concerning oil storage over the next 3 months.
Oh, that's a lot of oil. So are we running out of space to store oil here in the U.S.? Well, according to the Energy Information Administration, or the EIA, we are. One analyst from the EIA says this could drop the price of a barrel of oil by at least $5, but as much as $12 over the next few weeks. Well, I like the sound of that.
Now, over the last year, the price of oil has been on a steady decline, with the exception of a slight fluctuation recently. Now, currently, oil is at $48 a barrel, which is, it's pretty unusual. And even more unusual is the fact that right now, we have the highest oil inventory stored up, as we just mentioned, in 80 years.
80 years.
80
so
years.
Since like the early 1930s.
That's
34, right. 35. Wow. Well, Jeff, one would think that if we have so much oil just being stored away, that it would quickly drop the price of oil products like gasoline. However, this is not the case, experts are saying, and no one is predicting it anytime soon. So while gas prices have dropped dramatically from $3.55 a year ago to $2.42 as the U.S. average today, there's no sign they will continue to drop at this point. Wow, I was really hoping for, 78 cents a gallon of gas again.
That's right. Well, other factors affecting gas prices besides oil production and inventories may be the reformulating of gas in the spring and the closing of many oil refineries to change how they will be producing this reformulated gas. Now, however, this is what the analysts are saying, that these may just be excuses to keep the prices from dropping too low for government and corporate comfort.
Because they have to keep changing the formulas.
That's right.
Well, there's a complex tangle of interest found in the Middle East these days. Saudi Arabia has been bombing Yemen for over 3 weeks now, directing its rebel attacks, who the Saudis believe are backed by the Iranians. Iran has bitterly opposed to this bombing, and the U.S., meanwhile, is helping the Saudi campaign while also seeking to strike a compromise with Tehran over its nuclear program.
Well, President Obama has proclaimed Israel as its closest friend and ally in the past, saying the bond between our two countries or two peoples is unbreakable. Now, the steps the White House is taking to make nuclear agreements with Iran is pushing Israel to impress its own agenda on the U.S. more vocally. Speaking in early March at the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C., Netanyahu urged, saying, "We must all stand together to stop Iran's march of conquest, subjugation, and terror."
What seemed impossible just a few years ago is now in the works. Iran and the U.S., once bitter enemies, are negotiating for a nuclear deal, and Washington's traditional allies are not in agreement over this. Now, Netanyahu recently stated this deal would pose a grave danger to the region and to the world. However, his U.S. counterpart, President Obama, is thinking the exact opposite, saying it will make our country, our allies, and our world safer. So a little bit of opposition there.
That's right. Well, the Saudis are siding with Israel, saying they would provide their airspace, if Israel decided to bomb Iran. Now, historically, Israel and Saudi Arabia don't even have diplomatic relations. They vehemently disagree on the Palestinian issue, but when it comes to Iran, they have become neutral allies.
So, of course, the Obama administration's dealing with Iran have made Israel and Saudi Arabia feel a bit betrayed. Only a bit, though, because even while negotiations with Iran are going on, the U.S. is still helping Saudi Arabia to bomb Shia rebels in Yemen. Washington supports comes in the form of refueling Saudi fighter jets and providing intelligence and logistics assistance to the Saudis.
While the Obama administration suggests that this deal with Iran could be the start of a new relationship, what does it mean for Israel and Saudi Arabia moving forward? Michael Malouf, security analyst and former Pentagon, said, if the agreement is agreed to, it's going to create additional problems between the United States and Israel and certainly continue to chill relations with Saudi Arabia for some time to come, including the other Arab countries.
The Saudi airstrikes over Yemen have continued for 23 consecutive days now. As the death toll from air raids mount, at least 20 people were killed in the latest airstrike, which targeted the country's largest military airbase northeast of the city of Lahaig in Yemen. Officials say fighters and allied forces were hit by the airstrike while they were moving out of Al-Anad Air Base. Wow.
Riyadh began its aggression against Yemen on March the 26th and has bombed several cities across the country, including the capital. Now, Saudi Arabia attacks have left over 2,500 people dead so far, Katan.
Wow, that's just way too many. Now, Iran is not standing by quietly while Saudi Arabia invades Yemen by air. The senior Iranian commander of ground forces, Brigadier General Ahmed Reza Pordestan, described the Saudi military as, quote, a mercenary army, and said the aggression against Yemen may cause the unrest to spill over into Saudi Arabia. The general also claimed the Iranian army is prepared to counter threats posed by terrorist groups and gave assurance that Iran's borders are heavily protected.
Now, Yemen ranks 39th in world oil production at just 133,000 barrels of oil a day. Now, that means it contributes less than 0.2% of the global output, according to the EIA report from 2013. So why are the current events taking place? They're having so much of effect on the oil market. Well, Katan, it's all about one word: location.
Makes sense. Yemen is located on the Bab el Mandeb Strait, by volume the fourth biggest shipping choke point in the world. In fact, 3.8 million barrels of oil and petrol pass through it each day. If this strait were closed, oil tankers would have to take the much longer route around the southern tip of Africa, adding to cost and delivery time. Even more importantly, Yemen shares a border with Saudi Arabia, which is the world's largest exporter of crude oil. So while thousands of barrels of oil from Yemen aren't enough to trouble the market, millions of barrels from Saudi Arabia would definitely be a different matter.
So it's not so much about the production, but the location of where Yemen is.
Getting that transported right.
That's right. Well, protecting the oil trade in its present state is, of course, one of the chief aims of U.S. foreign policy. And YPN's Larry McGee has our story on the American author and historian who is speaking out concerning America's global ambitions. Larry, what exactly does this author have to say?
The famous author and historian William Bloom sat down with reporters this week in an effort to provide insight concerning the obvious intentions of the world's chief nation to build a new empire, the same intentions of which many people are identifying as nothing more than an effort to resurrect that old empire of papal Rome and its tyranny. With presidential elections on the horizon, the question posed by analysts is what, if any, changes can the world expect with regard to American foreign policy following the election of either former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton or former Governor of Florida Jeb Bush, both of whom are believed to be potential candidates in the upcoming race. According to Bloom, however, U.S. foreign policy will not change at all, regardless of who occupies the president's seat or what party is the supposed victor. They both have the same foreign policy, rooted in the same ambition for America to dominate the world. The next biggest question, nagging the conscience of analysts, is the question of the ballistic missile shield in Europe. In April of 2009, President Obama stated that if the Iranian threat were eliminated, the United States would have a stronger basis for security, and the driving force for missile construction in Europe would be removed. Fast forward to 2015, the U.S. is currently involved in very promising negotiations with Iran. But despite this, NATO, the army of the Pope, is asserting that that will bring no change to plans for the BMS in Europe. Mr. Bloom, in offering a few words to explain the NATO position, says that NATO is nothing more than an arm of American foreign policy, and there is really no point in making a distinction between the two. America founded NATO, and if America was not in NATO, NATO would not exist. So, Bloom says, it doesn't matter if it's Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, or whatever. The test is, do you love the empire or not? Of course, it is this lack of love or unwillingness to support the building of the empire that has had Russia in the crosshairs of the West for some time now. And in explaining this situation, the famed author says Russia has two characteristics which make it an enemy. One, its military power, and two, it is not a client of Washington's policies. It is not a great admirer of the empire, and the same applies for China. According to Bloom, those two are all it takes to become a major enemy of the West, whose only true concern is complete and total dominion. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Baton Jeff, back to you.
Oh, very interesting. It seems like many powers right now are in a competition for domination over the whole world. Very interesting. Guess we'll see how that plays out. Well, since the 2011 earthquake off the coast of Japan that severely and permanently damaged the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, many have suffered in the way of unemployment, contaminated resources, and even loss of life, including children. Death has been a result of radiation poisoning to these people. Things suffered include heart conditions, leukemia, asthma, thyroid complication, and lots of children are extremely tired after school, and some, they can't even attend physical education class. That's how worn down their bodies
Definitely
are.
not normal for children
No,
that are
no,
normally
usually,
full of energy and very active.
So something's definitely going on.
Well, these facts have been evident throughout the country, but people say that authorities, and of course they're referring to the government, are still hiding the truth from the people. Parents and concerned citizens have said that it hurts to know that they, again referring to the government, cannot protect our children.
So what do you think it would feel like to get hit with a 3,000-pound bullet?
Well, I can't imagine, but it can't feel great.
No, that's right. That's what one man experienced in Marianna, Arizona, as he was walking through the city, terrorizing the neighborhood with a loaded rifle that was stolen from a local Wal-Mart store. The suspect appeared suicidal at one point, in fact, pointing the weapon to his head as authorities approached him.
Now, in a move to try to neutralize the suspect, one of the officers, Michael Rapico, that was responding to the call, aimed his cruiser at the suspect, accelerating and rammed the suspect with enough force to send him flying through the air, looking like a rag doll, if you see the video, and the cruiser itself barreling through a cinder block wall. Now, it looked like a scene that you'd see maybe right out of a Hollywood movie.
Oh, man, I bet that had to be something. Mariana Police Chief Terry Rosama defends his officer's actions, saying that it was a tough call for the officer to make at that moment, and that it prevented a shootout with the officers, with 36-year-old Mario Valencio, who was also suicidal. 2 days later, after he was admitted to the hospital, Mr. Valencio was released and booked in jail to be held accountable for his crimes, according to Mariana Police Chief.
But the suspect's defense attorney said, "How could you possibly believe you're attempting to save a person's life by almost killing him?" Now, earlier that day, a surveillance video showed the suspect stealing a rifle and ammunition from a local Wal-Mart. He was already a suspect for a day-long crime spree that included robbery, auto theft, and arson. Now, when an officer approached him, he pointed the rifle at his head, at his own personal head, and you can hear the officer pleading with him, saying, "Don't do it," of course, in that video dash cam.
Right.
Now, the suspect then fired a shot into the air and continued walking toward the businesses and homes that were very in close proximity of where the officer first approached him.
Right, very heightened situation there. Even a former LAPD deputy chief, Stephen Downing, who also saw the video footage, said, "I believe the officer did a good job. You have a rapidly moving situation. He used a gun. He was wanted for robbery. He was in a neighborhood. This was smart, I think," he said. The officer was cleared of any wrongdoing within just a few days after the investigation. And interestingly, the suspect was treated in the hospital the night before for a meth overdose. So it definitely seemed like the man, he needed some help and some guidance. Doctors told police that the suspect had a skull fracture and some other minor injuries after the crash and is now in jail facing multiple charges.
Well, at a Walmart store, a family of 8, a Walmart employee, and 9 police officers were involved in a brawl in the Walmart parking lot. Now, the conflict ended with an officer shooting and killing a suspect and an officer himself getting shot in the leg. Now, this dash cam video that you're seeing shows what it looked like when the officers arrived on the scene using pepper spray, tasers, batons, all in an attempt to try to gain control of the situation. Now, Cottonwood Police Chief walked reporters through the 9-minute video of the melee.
The fight escalates as one of the members of the Gaver family got a hold of one of the officer, Sergeant Daniels' service weapon, and a struggle over the weapon ensued. The officer is shot in the leg during the struggle. It continues until another officer, Officer Hicks, draws his weapon. As soon as he did, another member of the Gaver family, David Gaver, charged the officer and was subsequently shot in the stomach before Officer Hicks shot and killed Enoch Gaver, who was the one that was struggling with the officer on the ground over his weapon, and he was shot in the head and he was killed.
Oh. Well, Cottonwood Chief Jody Fanning said the shooting was justified since the suspect still had control of the weapon. He was on top of Sergeant Daniels, and Sergeant Daniels had been shot. Now, the video ended when the officer was helped off of the ground and into a patrol car by 2 bystanders. Chief Fanning said, "I'm very pleased with my officers. At no time did you see them administer any kind of street justice or anything else that anyone else would like to call it."
Right. Well, after it was all said and done, 5 members of the Gaver family was arrested and are facing multiple charges, including resisting arrest and hindering prosecution. All but 2 of the 9 officers are back on duty, and Officer Daniels, that's the one who was actually shot in the leg during that brawl, he is still recovering from his injuries.
And lastly, in Panama Beach, Florida, sheriff deputies are searching for 2 men involved in a gang rape on a crowded beach in broad daylight during spring break last month. Now, 2 other suspects have already been charged. In addition to this sick act, Catan, remember it was a crowded beach, and no one, not one person tried to intervene whatsoever. Now, some even filming the crime on their cell phones. Now, one of those videos are key to solving the crime because the victim in the case said that she believes she was drugged.
Wow. Police in Alabama only discovered the video after they were investigating an unrelated shooting. They then alerted authorities in Florida. Now, the sheriff of Bay County, Florida, Sheriff Frank McKeithen, said he's seen many spring break excesses over the years, but this left him disgusted. He said in an interview, "You had people standing almost rubbing the incapacitated girl." They were so close to that incident. They were standing there more concerned about spilling their beer than they did about someone being raped.
Wow, shows you where people's minds are these days, no concern for someone else.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, he continued, "We have got to get control of our beaches. It is not safe for our children to be out there on the beaches when these animals are out there conducting themselves like this." Now, police arrested two suspects, 22-year-old Delante Martisti and 23-year-old Ryan Calhoun. Both men are charged with sexual battery by multiple perpetrators. The two are students at Troy University in Alabama, where Martisti had been a star on the track team.
Well, Bay County Sheriff said this is not the first, second, third, or fourth video that we've recovered. There have been a number of videos similar to this. I can only imagine how many we haven't recovered. The city has been struggling to control crime, dealing with the hordes of people who come to the area for spring break. In fact, last month, several students were injured in a shooting at a house party. One store owner said most spring breakers aren't troublemakers, but he was worried about those who were. He said, "If you come here with the idea of causing problems, we're going to come after you and put you away for a long, long time." Well, if you're tired of this sick, violent, and disgusting world, do you feel there's no way of escape? Do you wonder why all of this is occurring? Will it ever end? Well, Yisrael Hawkins of the House of Yahweh has been teaching and warning the world of what the scriptures prophesied would be for this last generation. What does the future hold for mankind? And are there any solutions to the problems that we've brought upon ourselves? Find the answers by contacting the House of Yahweh and, of course, requesting your free copies of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's what you can do.
Now, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com, and for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Well, don't go anywhere. Grab your pencil, papers, and your holy scriptures. Up next, the one bringing you the words of truth, Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Hammerman.
Thank you for watching.